Bienvenidos worldwide fans of cinema. Jaime En Fuego here for Enfuegotainment, where I'm constantly covering the hottest entertainment with an edge, my friends, and this is my look back at the best films of 2016 that I had the privilege to see. Did not review all of them, I did most of them, and yeah, you guys know that I cover the horror stuff, the fright-centric, you know, all of the scarific on the horror show, and so you might see one or two of those pop up here, but this is predominantly going to be general cinema, my absolute favorites of the entire year, any genre. First off being Captain America Civil War. Now, at the beginning of the year, my most anticipated comic book films of the year, definitely not Deadpool, definitely not Civil War. They were pretty much like X-Men Apocalypse because I love Days of Future Past so much. It was Batman v Superman, which, you know, I didn't despise it as much as many people did, but it was not without its problems. Definitely nowhere close to my best of the year. You can see reviews from pretty much all of these films that I just mentioned here. Yes, all four, now that I think about it, here on Enfuegotainment. But yeah, Captain America Civil War, I love the introduction of Spider-Man. Tom Holland did a fantastic job, even if he does share a name with the director that I love very much, who is kind of losing some cred now because of that little Brit boy. But yeah, the Spidey stuff, the Paul Rudd Ant-Man stuff, I mean, all this was just so well done. That airport scene alone, I've heard some people say maybe one of the best scenes in all of cinema the entire year. It's not very far off for me. I absolutely adored that. The rest of it, it could have been better, which is why it's not on the top 11, because I'm not doing 10, yo. I'm doing 11, cranking it to 11 here on Enfuegotainment. But yeah, I mean, Downey was great, Chris Evans is great, the two of them butting heads was interesting, but Marvel needs to get better at getting good villains, and so the super fight was just kind of, it was just kind of okay at the end of the day. Now the next one I have to speak of as far as honorable mentions go is Zootopia. Now this is a year where everybody was wanting to focus upon certain steps back in society, maybe, that we're taking here in America, certain things that I kind of thought that we had got past, to be nice and vague about it, but it was an interesting allegory from Disney as far as an animated movie goes. I can imagine that the kids loved a lot of it, you know? There was so many jokes with the sloth, and I mean, hey, Bateman's fox was hilarious and, you know, quirky and all this other stuff, but I felt like this had so much more to say below the surface about race relations, about, you know, just, you know, how we all work within society together and stuff like that. And so even though Finding Dory probably made more money, although at the end of the day I'm not 100% sure, people were probably anticipating that Pixar thing much more so. I know I was. Finding Nemo was a journey of epic proportions for me, and so Dory was big on the list. And you know, even though I love the return of Albert Brooks, and obviously Ellen DeGeneres was just primo and awesome, and new additions, you know, like Mr. Al Bundy himself were just great, but you know, at the end of the day, that movie did not do it for me as far as Disney animation goes like Zootopia did. I felt like Zootopia honestly had a lot more to say in the grand scheme of things, as opposed to on a smaller personal level of, you know, family. And then, you know, while still a good message, just Dory was not able to be there. Zootopia definitely is an honorable mention for me. Third and final of the honorable mentions is going to be Hell or High Water. I've seen this topping the list for people, and this is probably one of the biggest problems of the burden of expectation and the fact that, well, Jeff Bridges' performance as this Texas Ranger who's going after two brotherly bank robbers that he's hot on the trail of was very good. His chemistry with his partner was just the back and forth and the jibes and the smack talking was just, those were my favorite scenes in the entire film, even more so than the stuff that, you know, Ben Foster, who is great in everything he does, and I will watch him in anything. I mean, him, Sam Rockwell, and probably Michael Shannon are the three just weirdest enigmas to me in a lot of ways. I mean, they're not up there with like a Daniel Day-Lewis who has been established for decades, but as far as newer guys who just continually thrill, intrigue, and irritate me at times. Man, Foster was great. Pine, Mr. James T. Kirk, who we'll actually be talking about a little bit later on this list. Man, so good in this, and yeah. Hell or High Water, well, very good, and I love the conclusion and the little post-aftermath as well. Just wasn't quite good enough to get there. So now to my list proper, number 11. Yes, number 11, cranking it to 11, is Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping. Now, you may be saying, oh my goodness, you've got a comedy on this, Fuego. What the hell? Those other movies that you had mentioned, they are top-notch, they are amazing. Pop Star doesn't deserve to be on this list, but as I sat and I was reading some stuff from Collider, and I think Matt Goldberg might have even had it in his favorites, and a few other critics that I really respect who cover more broad, general entertainment, you know, as opposed to being more niche, like, you know, myself doing the horror, or others who do just straight comic book or whatever. I loved Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping, and in all honesty, I think I watched this movie more than any other movie on this entire list. I just could not stop laughing at the fake songs, the history of the band, you know. Everybody knows about Lonely Island because of Dick in a Box, and, you know, it would be my honor to be your new stepfather. Hilarious. So effing good. But the new songs in the movie, you know, where they're talking about the Style Boys and I'm a karate guy, I like to kick it. I mean, damn, was that so funny. And, you know, we're going to F you like we F Bin Laden. Good Lord, so hilarious. The full circle of, you know, just the journey of the splintering the band, the trying to figure things out, if you can still create together, going solo, the fact that they jabbed so wonderfully at Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, some of these silly, you know, documentaries of these pop stars with, you know, I'm not going to say they're not talented, but compared to the talents of like a Freddie Mercury, a David Bowie, some of these amazing people we had lost in the past or in this year where everybody was like, this is the most horrible year ever. I disagree. There was a lot of crap that happened this year, but you have to focus upon the positives, and the positives from the scene with Seal and the Wolves to signing some of these reproductive organs, my lord. Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping. Sandberg, I hand it to you, man. It definitely deserved to be on this list, even if it's at number 11. Now, number 10 is going to be Hunt for the Wilder People, or The Hunt for the Wilder People. I can't remember if I'm improperly, you know, putting that article at the beginning or not, but Taika Waititi, whose name I am probably totally butchering, is an amazing director. I have loved this guy since Eagle vs. Shark. He did work on the Flight of the Conchords. That was great, along with Jermaine, who you'd seen in the film that I just mentioned. If you guys haven't seen Eagle vs. Shark, hilarious indie, so good. He blasted into the mainstream across the planet, very rightfully so, with What We Do in the Shadows, and he's about to cover Thor Ragnarok. That's right, he is taking a big leap, similar to so many of these other smaller directors, into the big time, big money, man. James Gunn did such a great job. I believe what TT is going to do wonderfully with the Planet Hulk stuff. I mean, goodness lord, I am so excited. That might be my most anticipated Marvel movie of next year. But the performances in this movie were impeccable. You have this young boy who's basically like, he's almost like an orphan Biggie Smalls in New Zealand. He's like the Kiwi Biggie is the best way I can describe it. And he's bounced from foster home to foster home. He cannot seem to find a place where he just kind of fits in, and where his eccentricities and, you know, silly love of hip-hop, especially in an area of the world where it's probably not as renowned and respected, is just kind of peculiar. But he finds his home in rural New Zealand, where he's kind of on a farm, and you know, the mom loves him. They obviously have no kids, and presumably haven't had any before, to the best of my knowledge of, you know, what they imply. And he bonds with the mom, and then she abruptly dies. Spoilers, yeah, but that happens early in the movie, and the entirety of the film from there on out is him trying to make a connection, and indeed he does bond very wonderfully and hilariously with the husband who's lost his wife, and they end up going out in the bush and just going missing, and, you know, there's this big search for them, and an A-level cameo has to go to Waititi himself, the director, for presiding over the funeral. Oh man, when he starts giving thanks for certain things of the pop culture, you know, consumption variety that I don't necessarily want to give away here. I saw this at Phoenix Film Bar. Incredibly funny, heartwarming, a little bit of everything. That's actually something that I love, you know, where everybody is like, oh, where are the dramas on this list, or where's, you know, this and that. I love where comedy can meld itself with horror, or with drama, or with comic book things, or whatever, because life is a mixed bag of, you know, the silly, the scary, the contemplative, all these different things. I love The Hunt for the Wilder People. Seek it out. That's what I urge all of you guys to do. Now, my number 9 is going to be Star Trek Beyond. That's right. Justin Lin coming on board for this franchise made me think, what the hell is going on here? And not that I adored JJ stuff because I loved the first one, okay? And I had big time doubts when I came in for that Star Trek reboot, and I was just adoring Next Generation so much. It is my favorite incarnation of those boldly going where no one has gone before. I really like the original TV series. Those original movies were on point, off the charts. So good. DS9, very solid. Voyager, not so much. I'm very curious about this new CBS series, but I love Star Trek almost as much as I love Star Wars, if not to an equal level, because of the fact that there's been so much more of it and so many different incarnations of it. And I loved the reboot. The fact that they kept it within the timeline, despite being a slightly altered one, and they had Leonard Nimoy in there to tie it all in, and it was a pleasant surprise for me that I ended up actually loving. Now, Into Darkness, on the other hand, pissed me off. Not for the sheer fact that it was like a total turd. There are so many that are squeezed out every year in the, Hollywood big blockbusters, but Into Darkness, I hated the bait and switch. I hated the fact that JJ denied that, Khan was going to be in it the entire time, and then he ends up being in it, and then you had the tribbles, and so long story short, you had all these recycled ideas in Into Darkness, whereas I felt like the Star Trek reboot was its own thing, and it was unique, and it was interesting in that sheer fact, whereas Into Darkness, unimaginative, recycling older ideas, which is one thing that I really despise in Hollywood that is so prevalent in this day and age. Now, Justin Lin, again, had me skeptical, but I should have known with Simon Pegg writing, a devout Trekkie for decades, that this was going to be good, and damn was it good. Zoe Saldana as the girl who helps them out. Even Idris Elba, he wasn't the best bad guy ever, but he was more compelling than most, Marvel villains, and the way that they tied things in together story-wise, but more so than anything else, and rest in peace to Anton Yelchin, who you will also see on another pick on this list, that, man, the cast was just so good. It reminded me why the original casting in that first Star Trek reboot, when I first heard about that casting, that's what had me interested in that movie. Star Trek Beyond went back to focusing upon the cast in smaller, like little pockets almost, because they all get splintered off before meeting their way back to one another, and it was fun. It felt like an old school Star Trek episode, and I know many people have said that, but it is the damn truth. And we do have a fourth one coming after this one, despite the fact that it was less financially successful than the other two that we talked about. But yeah, Hemsworth coming back as, James T. Kirk's father, I think is going to be cool. But how about before we start focusing and looking ahead, let's just remember that Star Trek Beyond, for me, was one of the best movies of the year. I adored it. And that's not just as far as like genre type stuff goes. This, in my opinion, deserves to be in the top 10. It is an amazing Star Trek movie through and through. Now, this next pick is probably going to be the biggest surprise of my entire list for everybody. My number 8, Ocho, is a very small, hilarious film, and I thought this was even funnier than Deadpool. Now, Deadpool is on this list. Yep, it's going to be a little bit higher up, but I think this is the funniest movie I saw the entire year. And possibly one of the funniest films that I have seen in years and years. I laughed out loud more so than Popstar, more so than Deadpool, more so than any movie in recent memory watching The Bronze. That's right, my lord. If you're going to basically mash together Bad Santa and the Olympic Games, this is the movie for you. So you basically have this girl who's a gymnast, and she was a hero in her younger years, and she did a Carrie Strug of sorts and like breaks her leg and somehow finishes out, gets the bronze, and just shows America, oh, she fought so tough. She didn't get gold or anything, and yet despite her third place finish, she's done basically what anybody in her position probably would. She's milked it. She has milked it as much as she can, from endorsements to money to all this other stuff, and now when we meet her, she is washed up, living in her dad's house and doing the most vile and saying the most vile, insane things. Hence the Bad Santa thing. She is like anything for a buck. I don't even want to spoil what she is doing in this movie and what she says in certain scenes because of the fact that she is so connivingly, hilariously, just a despicable person. My lord. The Bronze. I mean, people were talking about the sex scene in this movie before I had even seen it, and while that is good and very amusing, just the dialogue, the situations, my lord, The Bronze, in my opinion, the funniest movie of the entire year. I honestly wish that I had watched The Bronze as much as I watched Popstar, because, you know, Popstar I had on Netflix and Bronze was a Redbox, and I had to get that shizzle back with the quickness. So it's one that I look forward to owning. I think it might be out now, and if it is not, please VOD it. Check it out when you can. The Bronze is amazing, hilarious, and so very good. And next we get to the aforementioned Anton Yelchin, and so my enthusiasm has to wane briefly because of the fact that Green Room was in my top 3 on our horror show countdown, and it's actually one of only 2 movies from that list to make it onto my list proper of every film that came out this year. Green Room, my lord. The performance from Yelchin that stands on par with that of Patrick Stewart. Yelchin is in a punk band, a hardcore band probably is the better way that I can describe it. They play a gig at a more rural spot after their first gig gets canceled. They're siphoning gas at the beginning of the picture. You don't know what the hell is going to happen. They're obviously on their last legs. Money is just very thin, as it always is with these up-and-coming DIY traveling bands, especially punk bands, man. They are not doing it for the money. They're doing it to spread the word. They're doing it for the passion and for the art. Yelchin's performance is great when they have their backs against the wall. Some shizzle goes down at this club that turns out to be full of white supremacists running the place, and it just gets worse and worse from there after they see something that they are not supposed to. Kind of a standoff transpires amongst members of the band, a couple groupies, and other people who were there. It's one of the coldest performances I've ever seen from Patrick Stewart. He does not typically gravitate, from what I've seen, towards these type of roles as the villain. He is amazing. Imogen Potts, Aaliyah Shawkat. I mean, there are some awesome women in this film too that are just strong and ready to just, you know, take on the adversity and the insanity that they suddenly find themselves in the midst of. Green Room, one of only 2 horror movies to actually end up on this list. It's an incredible movie and one of the best of the year in any genre, whether horror, thriller, drama, whatever you may try to classify it as. Green Room, man. And once again, rest in peace, Mr. Yelchin. You are going to be so sorely missed, brother. And after that somber note, we actually go to another film that ended up being far more somber than I anticipated. Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Now, this was my #1 most anticipated film of the year. Now, once again, the burden of expectation, but I came into this really loving The Force Awakens, and I like this better. I thought this was the prequel that I had always waited for. It was so well acted, even if, you know, to its detriment, some of the characters were underdeveloped and paper thin. Without question, my #1 was K2SO and Alan Tudyk's amazing voice work and just the life that he brought to a cybernetic being. A reprogrammed Imperial droid was incredible, but not to discount Diego Luna and Felicity Jones. I thought both of their performances were great. All the other supporting cast, intriguing. Didn't get as much time as I would have liked, but the ending to this movie and some of the Easter eggs sprinkled throughout were just a mind pounder for me. It was just so intense. The space battle. We actually got to see a space battle after not seeing a real proper space battle. I mean, we saw a little bit in Revenge of the Sith, but there was not one in The Force Awakens. We hadn't really seen one proper since Return of the Jedi. The way that they were able to use some old footage, I mean, Gareth Edwards, dude, you hit the jackpot on this. This, as much as I felt like Star Trek Beyond was an old school Star Trek episode, Star Wars Rogue One, or, excuse me, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, it felt very much like an actual old school Star Wars movie for me, unlike the prequels that, you know, with all of the digitization and the green screen. There was a little bit of CGI in this, obviously. Well, actually, probably much more than a little bit, but the fact that they blended it with the practical so well, like JJ did for Force Awakens. Rogue One, damn was it good. And despite people having problems with it, myself included, it is easily one of my favorite films of the entire year because, yes, the Force was really strong with this movie. Next up is my #5. Yep, that's right. The film that almost was higher up, but there was some reshuffling that went down near the end of things here, and as I gave further consideration, but hands down, the best animated film of the entire year, and a film that made me feel. I love movies that make me feel, whether I'm laughing incessantly and then thinking about things afterwards, or in this one where, you know, the humor where it was occasionally sprinkled didn't work for me, but the human connection in Kubo and the 2 strings blew my mind. Best animation that I have ever seen from the same crew that did Box Trolls and Paranorman. This was just so beautiful, where he's telling his story early in the film to just a crowd of people in this small town that are coming up and just watching him make these little just paper creatures, and he's singing and he's playing, and his connection with his mother, just the mythology of everything, from the fact that he was kind of on the run from a family that he knew pretty much very little, if anything, about. This is maybe the movie, along with another that is going to be right up on the list here in just a couple picks, that got me in the feels the very most. Especially the ending had me literally in tears. It focuses so well upon the undying connection of family that, you know, even in death, as they just kind of just bring home in this, even in that transition, the memories, the energy, it never fades, and it was so beautifully animated. Matthew McConaughey and Angelina Jolie, however, did not really wow me in their vocal stuff, and so that's probably one of the things that will hinder this from actually being a little higher on the list. It dragged kind of a bit halfway through, but easily the best animated film of the entire year. Kubo and the Two Strings, cannot recommend it enough. Now to my number 4, that's right, Quattro. You know, I hinted at it a little bit, and this was almost a bit higher, but there was just certain dramatic essences that were donuts, totally absent in this, that I just couldn't push it up higher. For a while it was my number 2, then it shifted to 3, and it ended up at 4. Deadpool, the best comic book movie of the entire year. Easily the best comic book movie of the year. That's right. Sorry, Civil War. Sorry, Doctor Strange. And I really, really love Doctor Strange as well. But Deadpool took everybody by surprise, including the movie industry, with the amount of money that it made, with the fact that it's the highest grossing X-Men just universe film that they've ever done, even more so than Days of Future Past, even more so than X2 or 3 or some of the Wolverine solo movies. Who knows what's going to happen with Logan? That's in my highest anticipated on the Fox side of the comic book genre, but Deadpool, my lord, Ryan Reynolds, bless you, sir, for sticking with this movie and just making sure that it got made, even after the fact that they put a muzzle on you, even after the fact that they totally just bastardized the character in that Origins Wolverine film. You stuck with it, man, and I know there's some sour grapes between him and Tim Miller, which is why Tim Miller is gone from the sequel, and they're bringing in the John Wick director. I personally think that's going to be an awesome fit, but only bad things I can say about this movie and why it couldn't raise higher is the fact that, you know, Ajax or whatever the hell his name is, and the former wrestler, fighter, whatever woman she has, underdeveloped villains. But you know what? It didn't need to focus upon those because this was an origin story, and I know some other people were critical about that, but the use of flashbacks, the use of humor, and even more so than anything, for me, the love story. The fact that that mangled face of his was one that a woman could find herself after a few beers sitting on was just so endearing, so funny. The interplay between him and Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead, I mean, the deleted scenes and the outtakes alone for this, buy the Blu-ray, when everybody is shrinking the special features and bonus stuff, Deadpool brought it home with the fact that Reynolds is so talented, and the fact that he was ad-libbing and doing so many things. Same with Mr. Miller, his little sidekick in this that's running the place where he's putting his bets down and whatnot. Man, TJ Miller was so funny in this, and so, yeah, Deadpool, it could have been higher, and I am very happy to say that it is one of the best movies of the year, and the best, hands-down, comic book movie of the year, period. No more arguments with me there, but I'm curious to hear if you want to try. Now we come to number 3, and this is another somber film. It's also a film that was on my The Horror Show channel Best of the Year. This was in my top 6 horror films of the year and actually sat at number 1 at the end of the day when it was all said and done. Brian Bertino's The Monster. Man alive, this movie is gut-wrenching. Not because of the fact that you have an incredible, mostly practical creature that is terrorizing a mother and daughter on the side of the road. A24 always brings it, whether it's Blackcoat's daughter, whether it's, you know, The Witch, which could have easily been on this list if, well, you know, if there was just a couple things that they had tweaked with it. But man alive, Brian Bertino's The Monster was incredible. And the fact that at the end of the day, despite the backdrop of that creature terrorizing and whatnot, it's about a mother and a daughter and 2 powerhouse performances, you know, by the both of them. And just, it's almost like a passing of the torch in some ways. It is a film where you will just be sitting shaking in your seat, not always from fear of the physical creature, but there's another monster in this film as well that dwells within another character, and just the personal struggles of that. and it is sad. It is really sad at times, and yet so emotional and so empowering, and Brian Bertino created just an immensely amazing film. I have to give a shout out to Monty Yazzie for, this is in my top 3 of the year for any film, not just horror. It's my favorite horror movie of the year. I cannot recommend Brian Bertino's The Monster by A24 enough. Now for my number 2, we come to Arrival. That's right, the re-arrival of quality sci-fi, thought-provoking sci-fi, and not necessarily of the, people are comparing it to Contact, myself included, but the more I thought about it, this was more reminiscent of Close Encounters of the Third Kind by Spielberg, and the fact that it's not necessarily the malicious, monstrous aliens, despite their appearance, that you would think. Now, the Alien franchise that Ridley Scott and James Cameron really got going is my favorite sci-fi series with horror, tinges to it of all time. But I was always fascinated by just sci-fi where we don't necessarily know the intentions of the, alien creatures, the visitors, so to speak. And, the performance by Jeremy Renner was good. Forrest Whitaker was good. He brings it in pretty much anything, even in his small part in Rogue One. But Amy Adams, my lord, was this a performance that just sat with me. Very similar to that in the dramatic sense of the mother-daughter duo in The Monster, because of the fact that despite being a film with beautiful special effects and these crazy looking ships and creatures that are housed inside, and the fact that it's a global thing that's going down, and what are the intentions of these creatures and so on, at the end of the day, despite appearing so big, as we mentioned in my review on Enfuegotainment, that Luis Hernandez, shout out for all your help this year, and Cecil Laird, commented with me on, it's a very personal film. It's a very small film. The fact that time is also fragmented and not necessarily what it seems, it's so good. My lord, and good almost feels like a disservice to this film for how truly great it is. Arrival is an incredible movie. It says so much once again, commentary-wise, about not just the state of my country here in the U.S., here in Arizona, Phoenix, where I'm born and raised, but just about how we need to come together, how we need to pursue unity. Some people may say, that's some crap, blah, 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 or, why does everybody gotta get along? We should focus on differences and whatnot, but the message of this film and the whole, it's better to have at least tried, and even if the results aren't necessarily exactly what you want, sometimes it is about the journey and less the destination, but perhaps that's, just kind of giving too many things away. But Arrival, not to be confused with The Arrival, which is a very different but also very awesome movie that's in a different tone with, Mr. Charlie Sheen. So my number 2 of the year is Arrival, and I can't wait to hear you guys comment about this. Tell me what you thought about it. As we get to my number 1, that's right, the best movie of the year, the number 1 film of the year. Sadly, a film that I had press tickets to like 2 or maybe 3 different times, and I ignored it. I don't know why the hell I ignored it, other than the fact that the writer and director is the same guy that did Once, which is one of my favorite movies ever, and possibly my favorite musical ever. Glenn Hansard, and, oh my goodness, the original songs in that movie just took me to another place. They're sad, they're somber, they're beautiful. Once, if you guys have not seen Once, it makes me sad that you haven't. Falling Slowly won the Academy Award, very rightfully so, for Best Original Song of the Year. But the reason I didn't see Sing Street initially in theaters when I had those opportunities was because of the fact that I didn't really like Begin Again, the director's second film, very much. Keira Knightley, you had some Mark Ruffalo in there. You had that idiot from Maroon 5 that I really don't like. And so, and yeah, he was playing a bad guy of sorts. And so, but Begin Again didn't do it for me the way Once did. Once was a smaller scale, kind of unknowns. You bring in the bigger actors. The songs weren't quite as good, despite a few scenes, one in particular where Ruffalo is envisioning music to a girl, Knightley, in fact, who I love so much, playing acoustic guitar, and he's envisioning all the instruments coming into play. Beautiful, amazing. But for the sheer fact that Begin Again didn't really do me as good as Once did, I didn't go seek it out. And that was a crime on my part, because I missed seeing the best film of the year for me, for Jaime En Fuego, in theaters. Sing Street is my favorite film of the year. Hands down. I've even got to grab my copy of it right now that I purchased, just so that you guys can actually see, man, Yeah, I know it might be a little refractive with my lights and whatnot, but man, Sing Street is such a it's an emotional movie for me because of the fact that I'm a musician myself. I was a young guy who was in love with somebody who seemed unattainable, or at least I thought it was love, and that's the thing. You don't even have that guarantee in this movie that the thing that is going down with this young Irish boy who has to change town, switch schools, his parents are in the midst of a divorce, the disarray of all of that. He's inspired to just start strumming on a guitar. He's got an older brother, which I did not have, which he can actually seek inspiration from, you know, and he can actually soak up that stuff. I didn't have that. I had to find everything all by myself, and maybe I would have been a better musician, better film fan if I had somebody older that I could really gain that inspiration from. And so the dynamic of the, you know, dissolving family and yet the relationship with his brother and everything that his brother is introducing to him just trickling down and inspiring him. The fact that when we are in our adolescence, we basically take inspiration and soak up everything that's around us art-wise. And that's not to say that it doesn't happen as we get older, because it still does with me, but when everything is so fresh and new, it is just an incredible experience to be just delving into art for the very first time from, you know, artists that will go on to inspire you. He decides that he's going to form a band after he gets done flossing on this girl who's an aspiring model that he sees just chilling across the street at this new school where he's an outcast immediately. And so after he's like, hey, you want to be in my music video? She's like, okay. He sweet talks her. Then he goes over to his friend and says, I got to start a band so we can make a music video. And yet the inspiration that comes from the process, all of the original songs are so good. There's a couple that are a little bit cheesy, you know, Drive It Like You Stole It didn't work as much for me, but for the most part, the riddle of the model, Ever Since I Could Crawl, you know, I was meant to find you, I was born to find you, all this different stuff. There's ballads, there's, you know, there's raucous rockers, there's, you know, there's fun pop stuff, and yet there's one scene in particular that just resounds with me every single time in the numerous that I've watched this movie this year, and it's where the lead character basically lies his way into starting his band, and this very talented, you know, multi-instrumentalist kid that he's like, yeah, I've got songs, I can sing, I'm a singer and this and that. Near the end of the film, he shows up at his house and he's like, you want to help me write a song? And what's the kid's response? Always. It just warms my heart so much, thinking of me when I first started writing, when I first started bonding with friends that loved music as much as me. Sing Street it's sublime. It is a revelation of music, of love, of camaraderie, of women, of interaction, of music, of all of these different things. I'm starting to get, you know, almost incoherent with my gushing because now I want to pop in that movie and watch it again. Sing Street, my God, Sing Street is so incredibly good. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. I got to extend a grande gracias to anybody who checked out my stuff here on Enfuegotainment this past year, or over on the horror show where I'm always covering, you know, just the scary, informative, and the frightastic. I love all forms of cinema, all forms of art. I've been diligently working on a new project which is called Chiron. That is a band where I play drums and assist a bit in the songwriting process. It is metal, it is heavy, it is fun. We have 12 songs demoed in this past year. We are going to be doing a music video, entering the recording process proper in a professional studio and getting things going. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be slowing down on the Enfuegotainment coverage here. We're actually going to be possibly slightly decreasing the horror show stuff just a wee bit, going from probably 2 to 1 episode. We haven't determined yet, but there's also going to be more time for Enfuegotainment coverage with that. I look forward to 2017 and all of the excitement that it entails, and I am maintaining the power of positivity as we go into this new year. I'm going to look at it as a glass half full of beer as opposed to just, you know, half empty and nearly done with. So let's all maintain that outlook. Let's have an awesome new year. So you can find me, Jaime En Fuego, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, show some love. It is greatly appreciated. And until we see each other in 2017, hasta luego, Cinemigos. But I hope that it is sooner rather than later. Peace out. Adios. Y feliz año nuevo. That means Happy New Year.